Atlas like in Philadelphia?
It's always good. Always good with steady. Always challenging.
Teddy, what were your thoughts on the training camp? Were you satisfied?
Very. Couldn't be better. Got to where we want to be. Now, of course, you got to go in there, obviously, Friday night and execute. But everything is in place. Couldn't ask for more.
Teddy, what was the thinking on your end in moving this camp about 3,000 miles east?
First of all, wouldn't have to acclimate to the time difference. Would be on the same time zone. Being that the weather was going to still be good. There was no problem with training here on the East Coast. Sometimes you got to worry about, bad weather with training on the East Coast. So we didn't have to worry about that. The time was good, and not having to get on a plane to go across the country on the Sunday before the fight is always a nice thing. That's pretty nice. And to be comfortable in your place and stay there right up to the fight, and then to I'm going to be very careful with this word, but it's a word that Alex used sometimes. But because we're very fortunate, we're very blessed to have these privileges and to have these opportunities to do what we do. But it's not the worst thing to suffer a little bit, to just remind yourself. And we're not suffering compared to what real suffering is. We understand that. I understand that completely. But just to be reminded that he's away from his family, he's got a beautiful family and a young family, and just to be reminded that why are we away from the family?
Right now there are 4 Alphabet Light Heavyweight champions, and barring a draw on Friday night, there'll be 3. How important to you is the idea of fully unifying the title? How difficult will it be because of the drawbacks at making those sort of fights? And the other thing is that will you feel like you are the one true king of the light heavyweights if you win the bout by virtue of those 2 belts and the other guys only have 1?
First of all, my dream is to become undisputed champion. This is the first step. And this is a necessary step. And the second thing is that this is what fans like to see. They want to see our, champions to fight some opponents or journeymen. This is the tough fights which fans like to see. And for me, it's a big challenge. Yes. About the second part of the question?
Obviously, you want to fully unify, but there are obstacles that sometimes that's under your.
I feel like a person A, like I feel it inside, but it's not proven yet, and we're doing the step to prove it.
Teddy, was it a good experience? I know it's a different style and different stance, but was it a good experience having faced a puncher in Stevenson?
It's never a good experience facing a puncher. Let's get that very clear.
But you know what I'm saying, going through the fact that you had a camp against.
Well, it's the same premise. Yes. No, I appreciate your question. Listen, in the way to answer that, in the way that it's directed, is that it's just again a reminder that there's no room for mistakes. That there's got to be full concentration for 36 minutes. Full concentration. And you have to fight 1 round at a time. 1 3-minute round at a time. Not 3 minutes and 59 seconds. No. Not when you're in there with a puncher that can change everything in a moment with 1 punch, as Stevenson almost did in the 10th round. But his character, the reason why he's a champion is because he was able to handle that and able to survive that. That's why he's a champion. You could look at all the other rounds and say he's a champion because of this, he's a champion because of that. He gave angles, he used his jab, he punched at the right time, but he's a champion because when the moment came, he behaved like a champion. And I have no doubt that whenever that moment comes, he'll do the same thing, but I'm just hoping that that particular kind of moment doesn't come, because we've trained to be very aware, as we did for the Stevenson fight, that there is no margin for error. There's no margin for lapsing or drifting for a split second. Not when you're in with a guy that can punch with the right hand the way Beterbiev can punch with that single punch. And so again, it's never comfortable to be facing a puncher, but at least we know we've done it and we know what it takes.
Does facing him in the amateurs help with the preparation going forward to this fight?
No, it didn't really help for this preparation. And again, like a lot of people asking me this question, like about our fight. It was 10 years ago. It was amateur, and I kind of like I don't want to make it sound like I'm making an excuse. So 10 years ago, he was just better. Period. And right now, it's different times, different sport.
Teddy, during the Stevenson fight, you had talked about, to Oleksandr, we are piranhas, we're taking small bites, given the fact that you had to kind of chip away at Stevenson, you felt, with this power. Does the same philosophy, in your view, or a similar philosophy hold in this fight with Beterbiev?
Yes and no, to be honest. If there's moments to take bigger bites in this fight, we're going to take them. At whatever time that is. If it's early, it's early. If it's late, it's late. If it's middle, it's middle. He's got great judgment and instincts, and we put that in place. And I know that we can depend on that judgment and that instincts when it's time to take a bite, small or big. We never want to get greedy. Mm-hmm. You never want to get greedy, especially with a puncher.
Right.
But I think this fight's a little different than maybe some people envision it. You know, it's not going to be exactly the same as the Stevenson fight, because we have a guy that there's going to have to be moments. Put it this way, there's going to have to be moments to take bigger bites with this guy, if you can understand what I'm saying. And that doesn't mean getting sloppy or careless or greedy, but it means what it means.
So, Teddy, you think that a couple times, like Beterbiev to me,
But the bite's in the right place, not standing on the sidewalk, you know, eating a hot dog.
Right, but would you say that Beterbiev, in a lot of ways, is a guy that loves to come downhill in one direction, that if you back him up and put him on his heels, that he's not the bully that he likes to be?
Maybe I could get you in the corner to
You don't want that.
Maybe on Friday night. But we have a plan, and Alex has worked so hard to institute that plan, to practice that plan, to be prepared to go forward with that plan, and he will. I have absolute. And again, part of what makes him special is that he's able to think properly under pressure, where other people don't always think properly. Mm-hmm. You know, it's hard to think properly for some people, period. But I know I have trouble sometimes. But to think properly under that kind of situation and that kind of pressure, that kind of duress, he does a real good job at it, and he will again on Friday night.
I had asked Artur this question, and I'll ask you too, because legacy could mean being a champion and in the same weight class for a lot of defenses, as Hopkins did at middleweight and other fighters have done. For some people, it's, you know, being multi-division champions, moving up. When you're a light heavyweight, the next step up, cruiserweight, that's 25 pounds. I'm looking at you, and that's hard to imagine. Maybe there's a big fight there. Maybe there's a big fight at 168. I don't know if it would be how difficult or not it would be to come down. But Artur said, no, I'm a light heavyweight, period. From your perspective, if there was something huge at either cruiser or super middle, or just your body telling you that you're a light heavyweight and that's where you need to be?
You know, like again, for right now, only one challenge and one opponent exists, and for me, I'm not even thinking about any other opportunities. But everything's possible in future. Maybe go up or even go down. You know, I think it's possible, maybe hard, but possible. But again, right now, I'm not even thinking about it. You know, like we're looking too far.
Oleksandr, there's a lot of good trainers out in Southern California where you're based. You've seen Teddy Atlas, I'm sure, rant and rave on TV before. Respectfully, he does a very good job of it. What was it about Teddy that said, this is my match, this is a fit for me?
Teddy is very picky, very particular, and this is what you need. You know, sometimes you cannot evaluate right yourself. Sometimes you think you're too tired. Sometimes you think you want to work more. Teddy know exactly what we're supposed to do, and there's no place for argument. And I think, first of all, he's a good person, because when I met him, I realized that. And like I told a lot of times before, this type of person already under extinction, probably even not existing anymore. But from his professional qualities, beside his qualities of human being, he's very smart. He's over 40 years in this business, and he never loses any small details, which is really important at this time, because we already know all the basics. You know, everybody knows the basics, but all the small details, or sometimes, you know, you think, okay, I'm already too good, and maybe somebody can forgive me some mistakes. And Teddy always on top of it and never let it drift. And again, you know, it's always a conversation, but he's kind of like a dictator, smart dictator. And this is good. This is, I think, what I need at this point in my career.
Teddy, three training camps now, about a year since working with him. Where have you seen the biggest strides or the biggest improvement in him from the first camp to this camp now? Because it's hard in just a year to make big changes, understandably, but where have you seen the most improvement since you've started working with him?
Getting hit less. I think that's a good place to start. Getting hit with, you know, hopefully with clean punches, big punches less. But I think maybe if there's one area, a more definitive identity. You know, he's a fighter, and he was always a fighter. This is a bronze medalist that should have been at least a silver medalist, but we won't go into the corruption of AIBA right now. Because I happen to be over there calling the fights for NBC, and I also watched the fight afterwards, and I mean, he won every round, so he should have been at least to the next round. But so obviously this is a kid who knows how to fight and behaves like a fighter, lives like a fighter, acts like a fighter. But there were times when I looked at him where the definitive identity that I think is important for a fighter at this level wasn't always completely there. It was like he knew how to behave like a fighter all the time, but it was always like pressure to be going forward, just throwing punches. That he had to be busy, that he had to. And one of the first things I told him, I remember when I said it to him, the best punch that you can throw sometimes is the one you don't throw. And that was a change of philosophy and thinking, obviously, from, you know, a little bit from where he came from. And again, his attitude was almost a pressure on him, where if I'm not busy all the time doing something, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's not always true. You know, I joke with him sometimes. I say, listen to that song by Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. And it's no different in our business and in life, quite frankly, in many things. And so I think that my main focus and responsibility was to find that definitive identity for him, where not 1 minute he's Jake LaMotta and the next minute he's, you know, Pernell Whitaker, where he's what he needs to be in a consistent way, and he feels good about it, and he knows that that's the right identity for him, and to match up with him physically. I mean, if no one's noticed, besides that he's a very good person and a gentleman and behaved and a good-looking person, besides that he's tall and he's got pretty good length. So I think those things should be taken into account when you're forming somebody's identity in the ring. And so for me, that was my responsibility.
If I could ask Aegis a question. You've been with Oleksandr many years now, and you've seen the transition working with Teddy. You've seen his growth as a professional. From your perspective, what have you seen in terms of Oleksandr in the last year since he's been with Teddy?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at this camp. So I was in California, and they choose to be here in Philly. But
Not because we want to be away from him. Don't anybody read that into it.
Yes.
Sorry everybody, but my Ukraine and Russian much better. Александр, тем более ты, Аркадьев, и сейчас эту прямую трансляцию смотрят многие украинцы, и в том числе первый тренер братьев Кличко Володя Золотарев. Он передает свои добрые пожелания. И хочу вам сказать, что ваш соперник обладает чувством юмора. Я вчера сказал ему в одном из ваших недавних интервью, в котором вы сказали, что Бетербиев бьет рукой, словно копытом. Он улыбнулся и сказал, наверное, он меня задабривает. Так что, да, и пожелания вам. Вы родились, я не сомневаюсь, что знаете, что Харьков – это город с великими боксерскими традициями. И первая сборная Украины 1933 года готовилась в этом городе к первому чемпионату СССР. И капитаном этой сборной и одним из тренеров был мой отец Аркадий Бакман, первый призер тенниса Советского Союза. Вам искреннее пожелание. Помогай вам Бог и моральная поддержка, я верю, ваших друзей, великих украинских боксеров, как и вы, Василия Ломаченко и Александра Усика.
Спасибо, они будут,
Спасибо
они
вам.
будут здесь, кстати.
Спасибо вам.
I'll translate.
Thank you
Was there a question?
and sorry.
No, it was just...
okay. So to answer your question, I didn't see many changes. I don't think in the ring we need to see changes probably. In a life he's still the same.
Ted, what's the best way of neutralizing a big puncher?
Oh, me?
Not getting him. Not getting him.
Don't get hit.
Avoid him.
That's the best way. The best way, I would say, I would think most people would agree, don't get hit. Obviously, be alert and obviously have a good defense and, know where the danger lies. That's a big part of it. Where does the danger lie and what situations does it lie? Does it lie when he times you with a punch or when he's pressing with a punch? So I think that obviously that would be a big part of it.
Did you count how many times Stevenson hit him very flush?
Yes.
How many times?
Once.
Only once?
But he hit him in the second round. He caught him. But he saw that punch.
Okay.
And he's got a good chin and a good will. And, as I said before, the fighter's disposition to avoid going to a bad place when you get hit with a good punch. He has that makeup. But in the 10th round, it was the one that you're always concerned about, the one you don't see, where he timed him. And that was the one that hurt him. But again, he survived it because of who he is. I thought that we fought an awkward opponent, and I thought he was getting, quite frankly, into his rhythm when the fight got stopped. It was just, he never got a chance to really get into his rhythm. I don't think it was one of his best performances. It wasn't one of my best performances because I'm responsible for that. But I think that it was a kind of fight that you needed time to get into it, and he was getting into that place where he was starting to take control of the fight and going to get only better with a very awkward opponent. And unfortunately, it ended the way that didn't satisfy us or anybody.
Teddy,
Since came back with Alexander, obviously you worked with Tim Bradley. Now this being a big unification fight, people talking about in the boxing business, does this get your juices flowing a little bit extra, being that's a unification bout?
Getting up in the morning gets my juices flowing. I mean, to see my family gets my juices flowing. To know that I'm blessed to have a great, beautiful wife and children, and that I'm blessed to be around a person like him and have him part of my life. That having opportunities to do things that are good things and special things like this, opportunities to do those things, and granted those opportunities, given the trust of those opportunities, it gets your juices flowing, but you feel it. You feel the responsibility of it too. And you feel it every day, that you don't want to fail that trust that people give you. And that I feel the moment I commit to training him, that, okay, if I'm committing to this, then I have to come through on my part. I ask him to do things, and I ask him for complete, unequivocal trust and commitment. I have to be able to live up to that. And if you want to call it your juices flowing, or you just want to call it feeling something over you, you definitely feel it.
Alexander, obviously there are some very good trainers, great trainers, renowned trainers who work with 8, 10, 12 different fighters. And there's only so much time they can devote to any one of them, particularly if they've got a couple of guys getting ready for a fight around the same time. Teddy has never been one of those guys. He has to have a special bond, almost familial. The fact that you are the only guy that he works with, and that was going to have to be something that you both felt. How much does that mean? And that you were the chosen one to bring him back into the fold and do what he was born to do.
I really appreciate that, and this is what makes Teddy special. I know the trainers, I can understand, like one trainer, like you said, have a training camp with one fighter in one country and another fighter who he trained with training by himself somewhere else. I think it's not right, and Teddy would never do that. And again, for me, I feel like I'm special right now for Teddy, and I really appreciate it. And again, it's a blessing when I met him first time, and eventually he told me yes, because Teddy, it's not some regular average trainer. He's a legend, and I know that a lot of guys would be happy to work with him. And the thing he picked me really means for me a lot.
One more, guys.
Teddy, a lot of Ukrainian fighters, Lomachenko, Usyk, Gvozdyk, have very good movement. From your perspective, what's the difference between purposeful footwork and over-moving?
Just what you said, you're either over-moving or you're purposeful. You just said it, you couldn't say it more definitively.
Well, Stephen had them
more accurate.
Yeah.
No,
Cuts. Cuts.
I mean, it's no different than aggressive or effective aggression. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And that's exactly the answer. I think that if you're going to give an accurate answer, or proper answer, it's movement for a reason, not just for the reason of movement. It's movement to get somewhere that's the right place to get, and somewhere where you can avoid a punch and where you can score a punch, or you can keep it more balanced and set up something for later. But it's movement with a plan. It's movement with an idea of why you're moving. Not, it's a good point you bring that up. It's funny. I said to Alex one day, early on when we first started before the Stevenson fight, and I remember, I don't know, he probably does remember. He remembers everything. And I remember I said to him one day, why'd you come forward? Why'd you just move forward? And it was probably a thing nobody ever questioned him on.
why'd you just come forward? He was shadowboxing or whatever. If there's a reason to come forward, go ahead. I'm with you. But why'd you just come forward? I don't see a reason. For what? Just because it just took you over, right? I mean, think about it. Sometimes we just do things because we have nothing better to do. We just do. And in the ring, you can't do that. There has to be a reason why you're doing something. You can't just be coming forward with a jab just to come forward. You have to make sure that guy's not ready to hit you with a right hand. So I think that's exactly what movement is, and proper movement is, knowing why.
Thank you, guys.